As John said, my name is Salz. The most important thing to know about me is not me, it's my wife. My wife, Dr. Jean Lidke, is the author of this book and a variety of other books. I'm one of those people, I like to say I'm like Bill Clinton. I met somebody smarter than I was. I always wanted to be with somebody smarter than me, and I was smart enough to marry her. What that means to me is my wife is the brains and I'm the mouth. So I can sit up here and talk about things that she can't talk about because she is a little more reserved than I am, and I don't really care if I'm a little crazy. Now, in our terminology, we call that Jeffries. I'm a Jeffrey, I'm a Flake, and she's a George, a bean counter. The opposites attracting. And y'all are, quite a few of y'all are in the Design Thinking Academy. One of the important things to know about that is that opposites attract. Together, those different ways of thinking are a phenomenal team. But opposed, they're no team at all. So if you can work together, if you can understand each other, what you have is the ability to have a wonderful team to collaboratively create solutions to all kinds of problems. And usually what we're talking about when we're talking about design thinking, we're talking about wicked problems. Those problems that every time somebody goes to come up with a solution, it changes the nature of the problem. That's what a wicked problem is. And when you go after those kinds of problems, you're dealing with the issues that affect society, that affect organizations, that affect businesses, that affect couples. And you're going at them, we think, in the best way possible. So I want to start this whole thing. Everybody take a couple seconds and look at those two questions. Can you read them? For every $100 earned by an average white family, how much do you think is earned by an average black family? For every $100 in wealth accumulated by the average white family, how much wealth has the average black family accumulated? And this is out of last week's New York Times. Anybody read this story, by the way? No, nobody did. So jot down the answers, what you think of that. 0 to 25, 100 plus, 23, 50, 76, 100. So go ahead and just jot down some answers. This is the New York Times graph about this. And please notice this. The family worth, the accumulated wealth, we think, according to Yale, about $92 for every one. The black family has about $92 of accumulated wealth for every $100 that the average family has. That's what we think. According to the Census Bureau, the actual average amount is $5.04. Yeah, $5.04. Now think about that. If you were making policy for America, for Michigan, for my state, Virginia, and your perception versus the reality according to the census, some people may argue with the census, but if your perception is that much different, how can you make good policy when the picture you're seeing is entirely different from the reality? Okay, and the earning is about half, $50, $57. How can you make those kinds of decisions if you don't really truly understand? And around the world right now, I love to push New Zealand and Australia. Around the world right now, Germany's doing a lot of this, England, they're using this concept called design thinking and the important aspect in it of empathy, of truly understanding the individual so that we can make better policy for the mass of the individuals. Payday loans. Anybody know anything about payday loans? Did anybody know anybody who has used a payday lender? They're not people that you want to borrow money from. Look at this. Annual percentage rates for a payday loan runs from 391% to 782%. Use your credit card, it's only 18%, and that's awfully high. You go to your bank and you can get it for 4%. But why don't they go to the bank? Why do people go to a payday lender? Because we understand. The problem here, or the opportunity here, is depending on how you want to look at it, is that empathy is another tool that all of us have and can use, and some people use it to scam folks. Maybe that's too far. Maybe they're not scamming folks. Maybe they're just taking advantage of the fact that we all want people to understand us. It's a very common thing. Everything in design thinking is a hypothesis. There are no right answers, and nothing is simple. And that's what makes it fun. Now, this is a formal definition. I love to use the one that I thought came at Harper Lee. Has everybody read To Kill a Mockingbird? Okay, almost everybody read. Has anybody not read To Kill a Mockingbird? 3, 4, or 5 people. Try to read it. It is one of the great American novels. Okay? And Gregory Peck in there explains to Scout, the little girl, that you can't criticize someone until you walk a mile in her shoes, in the shoes. I always thought that's where it came from. Actually, it's a Native American concept, except they don't use the word shoes, walk a mile in your moccasins. Because you got to really get in there and understand each other. You'll notice that we say not sympathy and not judgment. What often happens when people try to help and it doesn't seem to work, and try to help and it doesn't seem to work, and they go to the rule book and they follow the rules and it does all this, is that we get, well, I'm doing everything right, and we get judgmental about them, whoever they are. And then sympathy is a little bit different on the flip side of that. When sympathy comes in, we're not looking at a real picture. We're looking at our own generosity in that picture. George Bernard Shaw put it like that: do not do unto others as you would have them do unto you. They might have different tastes. And empathy is about discovering, using, addressing, communicating over those different tastes, which means that you got to put yourself kind of in their mindset and begin to feel how they feel. Doesn't mean you want to lose your own personality, your own ability to communicate, to be yourself, but it means you want to try and do everything possible to understand. It is basic to human nature. We are actually born with it. Now the neuroscience data is coming out. From the moment we come out of the womb, we have this ability to empathize. They now think that babies in a mother's womb can actually recognize her voice. Isn't that phenomenal? And what a tremendous connection that is. Now, there's 2 kinds of empathy, one of several ways to look at 2 kinds of empathy. Affective, which is what comes natural to us and what we learn before we realize we're learning, and cognitive. Most of the time when we're talking about building an empathetic society or a better way of dealing with other human beings, we're talking about the cognitive empathy, not the affective empathy. The affective empathy can be pretty damaging sometimes. Now here's the interesting, and I'll show you the graph in just a second. At least 9 parts of the brain, this is what the neuroscience have figured out. They light up, you know, they do this, I don't know how they do all that stuff, but they light up 9 different parts, and the zooms back and forth, going left and right and across, of different intensities, depending on a lot of things. One is your sex. One is how old you are. One is your present stress level. All right? And it changes all that. So it's kind of a moving target all at the same time. We usually think about in terms of interpersonal empathy, which means that how I feel about you, you feel about me. And remember this as you think. Every moment that I'm up here blabbing at you, I'm telling you a hell of a lot about me. Right? What am I saying? And you're making judgments. You're taking insights, it's a better term than making judgments about me. And really, I don't know the impression I give, but I do know this, that my interpersonal relationship with you is going to be like Mr. Lynch here, 45, well, you're coming out later, 45 minutes now and 2 hours later, and then it'll be gone. What seems to be important for society is that social empathy, that ability to see people and understand people that we can't make the one-on-one communication with. How many folks, when you walk down the street, do you say hi to others? Oh, quite a few, actually. Wonderful. How many times do they not, percentage-wise, how many answers do you get?
Half the time, 90.
90% answers, 50% answers? That's a pretty high percentage. Don't go to Germany. Nobody ever responds to you in Germany. You know, you're very proud of it. I'm Guten Tag, Guten Tag, Guten Tag. And nobody ever responds to you. How difficult it is to begin to think about that. We're talking about social empathy. We're talking about empathizing with people that we don't see and talk to on a regular basis. It's basic to human nature. It is always changing. It's a moving target because of those 9 centers of the brain zipping in different directions. And it evolves with us as we evolve. So if we start out, and we're one of those kids who is like a preemie in the hospital, and the mother of the kid is desperately trying to feed the other 2 kids in her family, and she can't be there. So the baby spends most of his time under the little incubator light, the heater. Hospitals are now hiring people to come in and just hold the baby, because what they're trying to do is develop that interaction between the 9 lobes, the 9 areas of the brain, so that the baby has the ability not only to empathize, but primarily to be able to empathize with other human beings. So it starts from right there and it goes until the day we die. Now I'm getting to be an old man, and the older you get, the data now shows, the less likely you are to be empathic or empathetic, depending on which word you want to use. I don't know that. I hope it's not true, because I feel like I want to be empathetic. But am I? I don't know. Because nobody can tell me. I mean, I can't tell myself. I can pretend. I can look in the mirror and say I am. And of course, all of us do that to some extent. But am I? I don't know. The empathy resides in parts of the brain so ancient that we share them with rats. And that should give pause to anyone comparing politicians with those poor, underestimated creatures. Our societies are never completely peaceful, never completely competitive, never ruled by sheer selfishness, and never perfectly moral. Hey, the human animal is all screwed up. All of us. And those good people over there, those cheerleaders or whatever it is that we think are perfect, they're just as screwed up as we are. And it goes all the way through society. When you start with that understanding that everybody's screwed up, including the person in the mirror, then you're beginning the process of being empathetic to others on the social level and, of course, on the interpersonal level. Can we even teach empathy? A lot of people would say, no, we can't. That it has to start back when you were a baby and you have to grow into it. In Denmark, which is on all those surveys they do on that, is almost always considered the happiest country in the world. They force feed empathy. I forget the name of the program right now, but they started in effect kindergarten. They don't call it kindergarten. And they start with a process of, this is a picture of a sad child. What can you do to help? And you, according to the research that's coming out, and the little Danish kids will hand them their teddy bears, stuff like that. From that moment, they want you to understand. And all of the surveys that do this, they basically say the Danish, is that the Danish, the Denmark Danish, are the happiest people in the world. So they have to teach empathy. Can we do it? Can we teach it? Well, obviously, I wouldn't be up here if I didn't think you could. And there are dozens of research projects now which say, yes, indeed, you can teach empathy. But there's still a large number, maybe 25% of the people who talk about empathy who say that you can't actually teach it. It has to be born and bred into you. If you're in design thinking, How many people are actually in the academy? All this front row, a couple people in the back row. Good, that's where I'd be sitting, in the back row. All right, and 2 or 3 others. All right, in your design thinking, you know it's the key to good ethnography, which is understanding your consumer, your stakeholder, your client. If you don't empathize with them, you certainly cannot develop good products or services that help them. All right? Key to empathy, and that is the key research in design thinking. And of course, you're seeking the subject's pleasure pain point. If you're also in design thinking, you talk about journey mapping, the low points and the high points. You try to minimize the low points, come up with a plan to minimize the low points and a plan to maximize the high points. It is the key to finding insight for producing new things. In America, and probably in all democracies, we got to do it. We have to begin. We have to return to empathizing. We have to begin to work at understanding the way the other is, even when we disagree with them, and perhaps most importantly, when we disagree with them, because it's the basis of democracy. Unless we're going to totally get rid of our democracy, and there's some indications that might be happening, we have to do it. We have to be better at empathizing. Okay. Now today, most of you guys, when you go out into the world of the students, and most of you who are in education, that's probably the vast majority of folks in the things, we are middle class folks. Some of us perhaps upper class. We're almost always college educated. And often the people we are dealing with are not. They're lower classes, often uneducated, and often different races speaking different languages. So as a job, a future in the career world, a really good way to begin to think about it is I have to empathize because I'm here, they're there, and how do I match up so that we can communicate, we can deal, we can begin to solve the problem. Most policy today is quantitatively oriented. 73% of Americans X, 49% of Grand Rapids citizens Y. And what we're really looking for is a qualitative data, which is how people, how that strange, screwed up human being act. So often what happens is that our judgment, our actions trying to help folks in different situations are not seen as real. They're seen as either sympathy or judgment. Go back to that slide about payday lenders, because we understand. How many people have been in a bank? Everybody? Or a savings and loan? Go walk into a payday lender. It feels entirely different. They've somehow or other understood how that person walking in there, how they can hook them and keep them there, coming back time after time. Now we're going to talk about, or we are talking about, cognitive empathy in the era of today. The world revolves around me ethic. Is it more difficult? It's debatable. I would say probably. Is it more difficult to collect insight about others? To sense that deeper reality than they even talk about, the unarticulated needs. Okay? One of the good ways is the old standard of what I call pre-celebrity journalism. Back in the day, before the Kardashians and Justin Bieber became front page news. They used to do really good stories, and they still do, if you go to the right newspapers, really good stories that give us an understanding, someone to empathize with. Then they come back with the nut graph, which is the important information, the reason, the story, the nut of it. And then they build it out so that we care about folks. Now here are the concepts of good journalism. True curiosity, spit that out, Salz. If you're in journalism, the great thing about it is you're always asking people why. It's fun. The human animal is so screwed up. And you just get to keep asking why. It's wonderful. You get to do some research. Thank God for Google, etc. right now. It makes it a whole lot easier. You get to observe what people say and do. You're observing me right now, all right? You're making judgments about me or insights about me. You don't know whether they're right or wrong because you don't know me well enough, but you're still happening. You're observing me. And that is a great way to understand. In both journalism and design thinking, am I running on time? You need to tell stories and our prototype ideas. I like to use this one for the very simple reason. The product book, this is out of New Zealand, demonstrating the complexity of being poor, an empathy tool. And when I talked about this the last time, only one person knew why. Why is it such an awkward size? Thoughts? Ideas?
Because it's an awkward topic.
Because what?
It's an awkward topic. It's unwieldy.
Ooh, I hadn't even thought of that. Wonderful little touch. It's an awkward topic. It's unwieldy, so therefore they make it unwieldy. It's actually a little more practical than that. By being awkward, whoever gets it, the bureaucrat, can't just throw it in the back of his drawer. It doesn't fit. He has to deal with it. And that's really the biggest problem. Travel Smart in Australia, they work very hard to get people to open the material that they give them, right? That's what most of us do. We say we're going to get to it tomorrow when we back burner it, and it dies, okay? Notice that quote there from the Deputy Prime Minister. He was forced to open it. And you can talk, it's really a beautiful visual operation. And he said this, I never knew how expensive and time-consuming it is to be poor. And he demanded that his staff volunteer so that they realized why they were making policy, not just to make policy, that they got to know the people as real human beings, to empathize with them. All right, in the real world, those of you who are sticking around for the other 2 hours, the Design Thinking Academy, we're going to use a New Zealand tool that they have developed, which they believe helps people get more empathetic. All right? Those are the rest of us who are getting ready to leave. All right? These are some of the habits that quite a few people say that we should do. Let me talk really briefly about this one. Cultivate curiosity about strangers. Be a people watcher. They're the most interesting thing in the world to do. Everybody's got the art prize. What a wonderful show going on right now. The art is phenomenal. John has taken me around to quite a bit of it. But sit and stop and turn around and look at the people, look at the art. Watch them. They will tell you immense things about themselves and about humanity. One of my favorite, or one of the all-time great screenwriters, Bill Goldman, he says that that's what everybody wants to do if they want to be a writer. What they should do is go to the front of the theater with a chair and sit and watch the audience while the movie goes on behind them, because that's how they know and learn. Challenge prejudices, obviously. You want to look in the mirror and try your best to understand yourself and change them. Try another person's life. George Orwell, does everybody know who George Orwell was? Animal Farm, 1984, of course, the two most famous. His book that got him going was When You're Down and Out in Paris and London, or London and Paris, I forget which, caused by the fact that he was a colonial officer in India and beat up those Indians. He was a Brit, like you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be tough on those Indians. And he said that something is wrong with this. He went back to London. He quit the job, or he got discharged or something, and goes back to London, and he lives as a bum because he wants to really understand it. And then he writes two of the great novels of the last century. Skip down to the last 5 and 6. I think, and I think most people think, that if you really want to be empathetic, you have to be in the game. You can't just be interpersonally empathetic. That helps you with your relationship, but it doesn't help society, and we want you in the game. And I like to add these two. read newspapers and magazines for the very simple reason that when you get the magazine and when you go looking for this obituary that I gave you, or that John and Linda gave you, they passed out and gave it to you. This is the obituary in The Economist of 2 weeks ago. Does everybody know who Heather Heyer was? Okay, you read that obituary, you feel like you know Heather as if she was your best friend. And the writer, which in The Economist they don't even give you a name, the writer did such a beautiful job of taking us on this empathetic trip with her, or him who wrote it. But when I went looking for that, I just happened to stumble across Watch with Care, Sunless Solar Power, and Missing the Mark, Sanitation in India, and Papering Over the Cracks about the Brexit negotiation. What happens to you and to me if you read newspapers and magazines, what you care about you get, but you're also exposed to other things. And if you only get it online, Google does this for you, it tells you what you want to see. And it may be because you've already done it before so many times. And then think about this. When you do Google something, a question, say a political question, and 25,000 things comes up in 3.2 seconds or whatever it is, right? What do? You pick through it right there to find the ones that you think are the ones that are going to reinforce your opinion, right? We all do that. There's nothing wrong with it. So, but I say try to read newspapers and magazines and go ahead and greet those people on the street. They're really fascinating. I met my beloved wife, a smarter person than I am, and so I got to marry her by just talking to her, not actually on the street in Taco Bell, believe it or not. Okay. If you want to be better in your own mind, okay, I'm getting the hint right here. Give yourself an out. Look at this book, Get Out of Your Echo, or the last one, Get Out of Your Echo Chamber. We're almost always in it. We talk to people just like us, whether it be race, sex, age, political affiliation, economic status. Try to get out of that. Might want to know, if you talk about politics, Bias by Bernard Goldberg, who basically predicted the thing a few years ago. We all have selective attention, perception, and retention. That is how we narrow ourselves. It is natural. And you want to be fighting that as much as you possibly can. We overvalue evidence we already agree with and undervalue it if we don't. This is Howard Gardner's How People's Minds Adapt, how they move from one way of thinking to another way. Notice they all start with IE. The most interesting one for me, the two most, are resonance. Find something that person that you're trying to help empathize, that they can relate to, that they can resonate with, that helps them. It's in their latitude of acceptance, the space around an idea that they're willing to accept new ideas, and real world events. Interestingly enough, almost nobody changes their minds when we put together all of our efforts to produce them to change their mind. What almost always happens is when they have the data, when they have the research, the resonance, and the reason, and then something happens totally unrelated, and that's when they go, oh my God. And if you haven't been around, if you haven't talked to your girlfriend or boyfriend and basically said a million times, not good for you, not good for you, not good for you, and then something happens, it has nothing to do with it. That's when the person comes to their senses, we would say. This is our model of design thinking. You have one in the Design Thinking Academy, which, by the way, is probably the best thing that could happen to Grand Rapids right now. You are ahead of the game, certainly as far as undergraduate education, because you're willing to do that. You're willing to stretch. Okay, this is my shorthand definition of design thinking. Explore deeply, empathize continually, ideate quickly, prototype simply, and iterate constantly. This is exactly what we did when we built tree houses when we were kids.